Hi there, it's Mr. Sanchez in the auto shop again, and I'm going to show you today how to use a tire balancer. So the first things that we're going to talk about, of course, are some of the parts of this machine. First thing, this is the arbor shaft right here. This is where the tire mounts on and rotates around to check its balance. This right here is the hood, and there are some cones on the opposite side down here on the machine. One of the safety concerns that we need to be aware of with these parts I just showed you is the hood. The hood needs to be down at any time that the wheel is spinning on the balancer for a multitude of reasons. The reasons why: you could get caught in something spinning. The hood also protects from projectiles and rocks being flung out of the treads of the tires and at you or somebody else. It also has an interlock system built into it that allows you to stop the tire, or it does stop the tire rather, when you lift the hood up. That interlock system we never ever disable on one of these machines. So don't ever work on one of these machines that doesn't have a hood on it with a safety interlock on it. All right, so if we're going to start balancing a tire and wheel assembly, of course it needs to be fully inflated. It needs to be all assembled. The other thing that needs to happen is the weights need to come off. The reason for that is that if we spin it with weights on, weights are what we're actually using to balance these tires. If we spin it with weights on, we're not going to get the correct balance. Now, this may have already been done on a tire that you changed over, right? Or it may be a brand new tire that you just mounted on a brand new rim with no weights at all. So just to reiterate how weights go on, we've got our weight in place here. We use our weight hammer removal tool, hook it in place, and grab firmly and pop it off. Same for the front, same for the back. Some safety equipment that we need to be wearing and be aware of on this machine. No loose clothing, because of course we've got this spinning arbor shaft here that could get caught in just about anything that you're wearing that is loose. So no jewelry, no loose long sleeved clothing, things like that. Gloves, again, in the auto shop, gloves are always a good idea, especially around tires that get covered in all kinds of chemicals and other stuff you don't want to get on your hands. Safety glasses. Wear your safety glasses. The reason for wearing safety glasses on this machine in particular is the projectiles, the dust, the things that can come flying off of the tire as it spins around. Good. So we've got our safety equipment on. Let's talk about our environment. What we want around the machine is no clutter. Again, step on something, you slip, you get injured. We don't want clutter. We don't want things that we're tripping over top of, particularly tires that we've been changing over or tools that we've been using. We also want to work somewhere that is well lit, so we can see all of the work that we're doing and we can move through the procedure safely. So now that we've got the weight off of the tire, we're going to mount it on the machine. This is probably the most important part with regards to safety on a balancer. We're going to again lift it up using our legs. We're going to slide it onto the arbor shaft, just like that. With this particular machine, we need to use a cone to center it. There are a whole bunch of different machines and different ways that the cones center, but on this machine in the auto shop, we have a cone that goes on first onto the arbor shaft, and it is spring-loaded on the backside. So if you're looking for cones, we are going to look to the side of the machine here, and I'll grab a couple as examples. These are the cones that fit the center bore of the wheel. So if I turn the wheel around here, what we want to do is we want to figure out which one of these is the best fit. So I grabbed two at random. That one sort of goes inside, but you can see it's up on the edge of the rim. So not the best fit. Here's a smaller one. That smaller one, it slides down and then stops about halfway. Somewhere in that range is a really good fit for one of these cones. So that's the fit that we want for the cone. We're going to choose that one. We're going to put the other cone back. Again, keeping clutter out of our general area that we're working. We're going to take that cone and we're going to slide it onto the arbor shaft. Now that's ready to receive this tire and rim assembly. So I'm going to back up here and slide that tire on. It is now centered on the cone. The next step is to take our clamp, okay, and it's got a nut inside it, and interestingly enough, it's got these little clips that make your life easier. What that does is it pulls the thread away and engages it. That way you can just slide this thing on instead of just turning it a whole ton of times. So let's slide that in place. We'll press those buttons down, slide that in place, tighten it down. Now this is what I meant about this being the most important part. It's going to feel like it takes a lot of turns. It's going to start tightening up. Go until that clamp stops, okay? And then check your work. Rotate it around. Make sure it's not wobbling back and forth or it's loose. Give it a couple nudges with your hand. Make sure it's on there tight. Give it another tighten again. And that, to me, looks safe. Good, so that's mounted up. Before we go ahead and put this down and start taking measurements of the balance of this tire, we need to figure out what size this tire is. So we need to tell this balancer, the computer inside it, what size this thing is. That means we need to take some measurements. So the first step in doing this would be grabbing this arm right here, this measurement arm, and putting it right to the inside of the steel rim until it beeps like that. Okay? You see when I put it back, I've got a flashing number on my screen. If I rotate the tire around, I can adjust the rim size. Okay? So I could move through these different measurements right here. It's going to beep at me when it takes the measurement. But what I want to do before I enter that measurement is grab this rim caliper, okay? This rim width caliper, just like it sounds, is designed for going on the inside edge of the steel rim on both sides. And then it's got a little arrow right here that gives me a measurement of that width. So in this case, we're looking at a 5.5 inch wide rim. Okay? So now that we know that, we can put this back onto our hanger. And now we can enter our measurements. So again, pull this out to take the measurement from the machine out to the edge of the rim, which is important, 112 millimeters, or 112 centimeters. We're going to move this around. If we rotate it, minimum is 3 inches, maximum is anywhere up to about a 10-inch wide rim. 5.5 is where we were at. We measured that. We entered it. It beeped at us saying, yes, I accept your measurements that you've entered. You're good to go. I'll briefly talk about some of these other controls that are on here. You can change where we want to put the weights by hitting this button right here. And it changes where the lights are inside of the rim. You could stick one on the, use adhesive weights on the inside. You could have one hammer-on weight and an adhesive weight on the inside. The combinations are kind of endless. But generally what we do are steel rims with hammer-on weights on the outside, and that's what we're doing here. If you hit that button with the little dots and the cross-section of a rim, it is going to show you some green lights on the outer edges. That's the one that we want for hammer-on weights on the outside edges. Other details of aluminum wheels and special types of balances we'll talk about in more detail later. The other controls on this, we've got a green button here that is a start button. The machine should also start when the hood drops, part of that interlock system I talked about, and this big red button. That big red button is very, very important to be aware of and to know where it is. What that does is that's the emergency shutoff. That will shut this machine down if something is going wrong. So let's say we mounted a tire incorrectly and it's wobbling all over the place and it looks like it's going to come flying off the machine. If we're standing on this side safely away from this spinning area, we can press that button and the machine will shut down right away. So be aware of where that is. Right there, that's your emergency stop. All right, so as we talked about, we don't have loose clothing. We've got our safety glasses on. We've got our gloves on. We've taken our measurements. We've done all of the things that we are supposed to do for this tire and wheel assembly. We've taken weights off of it. We've made sure that it's not wobbling around anywhere. So without further ado, we're going to balance it. So what that requires us to do is to drop this hood down and get out of the way and allow it to take its measurement. And as you can see, it starts up on its own. The hood down, and we never ever try to move that hood up while the balancer is spinning. That's one of the most important safety factors with this machine, because you could get fingers, hands, something loose caught in that spinning area. Once it is, you've heard that it has gone through its cycle and it has stopped, we can lift the hood, and it is telling us that it needs a couple of weights on the two different sides. And in this case, in the mode that it's in, it's telling us it wants them in ounces. So it wants a 1 ounce weight on the inside of the tire right here. So this corresponds to this side of the tire. And it wants a 1.75 ounce weight on the outside of the tire. And it's telling you where the positions are. And I'm going to show you how it does that. All right. So as we rotate around, it's also going to beep at us when we get to the spot, but there are red and yellow lights. When you're getting close, it turns yellow on here. As we move up on the inside, we hit the green mark, and it will beep at us. That's when you're at center. And what it's telling you is it wants the weight at the very top center of the rim right on this side right here. So we're going to find a 1 ounce weight. And our bin of weights here. There's one right there. Okay. And it's still beeping at us. We're on center. We're on the green. What I like to do is come across the front of the rim, line it up. There's a little notch mark on the center right here. I'll line it up. I'll bring my hammer down, put the weight where it needs to be, hold it with one finger. And again, putting weights on is actually a bit of an art. So don't be discouraged if at first you are a little nervous or you're afraid of hitting your finger. With practice, it becomes a lot easier. The 1.75 weight's got to go on the outside. So I rotate around again till I find that top center spot. And just for the sake of you being able to see, I'm going to do it from this side, but a really good technique is actually to turn and face the other way around and do essentially the same thing I did on the other side of the weight. So I'll line that up, center with the arbor shaft, hammer that on. When you're hammering weights on, make sure they have seated all the way. Again, if we're afraid of rocks and little tiny things flying out, flying off of a vehicle or flying out when this is rotating around on the machine, imagine what one of these big lead weights, heavy lead weights, would be like flying off as well. So make sure they are strongly adhered or clamped onto the outside of the rim. We've now placed our weights on either side. We're going to rotate it by dropping the hood, standing away from it. And in this case, it is asking us for another 75 on this side. So you may have to move around, switch weights around, try a different weight. We may not have put quite enough weight on that one, so why don't we exchange the weight on this one. And ultimately the goal is to get both of these numbers to 0. All right, let's try that again. All right, so again, it's going to shift back and forth at times, but you're going to go back and forth and get your weights in the correct spot. and zero both of these out. When you're done using the balancer, make sure that you put your tools away. Make sure the rim width caliper is up on the wall. Cones are away, nothing is on the floor area. You're going to unscrew the clamp from the arbor shaft. Okay, place it on the machine. Remove your tire that is now balanced, and we're going to place our cone back on the rack on the side of the machine. So there we are, we've got a balanced tire. It's ready to go back onto a car. Thank you very much for hanging out with me and learning about the balancer in the auto shop.